Franchise Secrets, Eric Von Horn.
If you're not a part of the Franchise Secrets Facebook group, what are you waiting for? It's franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. I cannot believe how valuable this group turned out to be. When someone asks a question, the feedback is honest, authentic, very helpful, and it's from multiple perspectives. If you're not sure that you're getting the most accurate information about franchising, then check out the largest, most helpful Facebook group in all of franchising. Whether you're a Z, a Zor, a buyer, or investor, join our free Facebook group at franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. Welcome to the Franchise Secrets podcast. Eric Van Horn here today with Chris Elmore. So Chris is a buddy of mine. He's been in the mastermind of mine for a while now, since like the beginning. But before all that, before franchising, he had a successful career in marketing and advertising, worked for an agency for 18 years. And 8 years ago, he bought his first of 2 Orange Theory fitness franchises with a friend, and he still owns that today. And most recently, he co-owns, well, not most recently. Yeah, most recently, he's an area developer with an emerging child development franchise called KidStrong. And you're going to be hearing a lot more about KidStrong in the coming years. But he also owns a non-franchise business in the private pay home care world in Florida. It's called Concierge Care. And he has that with a business partner as well. So I wanted to get Chris on here because he owns 2 brands. Most recently, he just bought KidStrong. He owns another one that's not a franchise. And he's a marketing guy. He's does so many cool things. He contributes so much to the mastermind. So I wanted to get him in here to the podcast to talk about franchising. So welcome, man.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Eric. It's exciting and humbling to be here at the same time.
Well, dude, it's like I've been wanting to get you on for a while. I know we had some missteps. Well, you had a stinking flood in your house. You're not even at your house. So you're staying at a friend's house while your real home's getting like a major renovation, right?
That's right. That's right. My business partner was nice enough to take my wife and my dog in for a couple of months. So a good friend and good business partner, because everybody's first reaction is, well, that's a really good friend to allow you to, obviously intrude on them in that way. So very lucky.
Dude, that says a lot. It says a lot about both of you and your business partner to have that relationship after being in business. And I look back on my different partnerships and I can say that about most of them, not all of them, most of them. I have good relationship with all of them, but that's amazing. And I know that you've done things in partnerships and a lot of people are interested in partnerships, but like we do most of the time, we kind of go back to the beginning. So take us back to Orange Theory, mindset around buying that. Now it was just, your biggest mistake, I'm guessing, is you didn't buy more early on, but back then the Orange Theory, was it as big as it is now?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, it was a huge leap, as you might imagine, for me and for my wife. I hadn't really never owned a business before. It was really our life savings at the time. And so you go through some real soul searching when you have those kinds of inner discussions. And but I think once you found the right partner and, you take that leap kind of into the unknown and you just have to be confident in your own skill sets and the experience that you've gained in business over time. And then you just do it. It's like kind of jumping out of a plane and a net will appear kind of thing. When you've picked up those skills kind of along the way and make some good decisions along the way. But it was a huge, scary decision. And like you said, it was a very emerging brand at the time. No one knew what it was. Everybody will tell you, oh, gyms are very streaky, be careful about going into business with your friends. But, at some point you just have to, in your heart, feel it's the right decision and make that jump. And that's what we did.
I think it's important because so many people, like just entrepreneurs in general, they look at the end of the journey or the middle part of the journey. And it's easy to look back in 8 years ago and think, oh, it wasn't that big of a risk, or people could easily look and say, like, Chris, it wasn't that big of a risk. Orange Theory is a really big success in the franchise world. But at that time, like you said, life savings, really big risk that you took, and obviously it paid off. What were some of the things early on that you were unsure of and had to make really, looking back, they were really important decisions or important pivotal points in your journey as a franchisee?
Do you mean in the reasons for selecting?
Nope. Just as an owner, you own, you're in it, you are a franchisee now, and now it's decision time. First decision is to buy the stinking franchise. And then that's the easiest decision. Then there's a lot more decisions after that: hiring, firing, marketing, like where to spend money. Like, what were some, as a franchisee, first year, second year, like what were some of the big pivotal moments as you look back and you're like, that was a good decision that we made?
I would say one decision that we made was really picking, instead of waiting for the perfect, piece of real estate, really kind of trying to quickly understand the market and then trusting, your real estate partner, and then pulling the trigger on that was a big one. For me, I think doing the background research into the franchisor was a big, correct piece that I think we made. I called 20, I think, or the first 15 franchisees of Orange Theory, and I had 10 questions for them, about various things about the franchisor, and those things to help narrow the process and make sure we weren't making a bad decision on that. And then, I guess from a more experienced franchisee piece, really allowing my business partner to take that leadership and operations role, and not try to both share that responsibility was big. I kind of learned early on that it was going to be her show, and she could probably tell you it was a little bit of a struggle at first, because when it's your life savings and it's your baby, you're going to have questions. And I probably called her daily, and she probably wanted to rethink the partnership that first year, but eventually letting go of that is something that I think you have to be willing to do, depending on your roles within the partnership. But that was an important step for me and for us.
Let's go compare and contrast Orange Theory to KidStrong. So you said you called 15 to 20 of their franchisees when you did Orange Theory. How many did you call at KidStrong?
I spoke with, I didn't speak with as many, I wouldn't say it was a much faster process, because, I think, as I spoke with a current franchisee up there, and I was learning that the country was getting sold out really rapidly, and I needed to make a move on it. But because of that confidence of having the background with Orange Theory, it kind of gives you more confidence going into your second one, I think, to pull that trigger maybe a little bit faster if you get really comfortable. And we also did look at 3 other franchisors, prior to that as well. So, we kind of knew when we found out a little bit more about their leadership team and their growth trajectory, and some of the technology that they were putting in place was just brilliant. And we were like, this is going to be a mistake if we don't move on this quickly. And so that's how that kind of came about.
So here's, one of the differences, like you had inside information because you had a relationship with a franchisee that was already on the other side of KidStrong. They had gone to training. I think they were in the process of building out. And I know that you think you were out here, my property, at my house, talking to this other franchisee. And so you got to understand a lot more, talking to somebody on the inside. Like, how much more confidence did that give you? Because you didn't hear that, you might have heard it from the sales team over at KidStrong. Hey, we're selling out fast. You got to make a decision, Chris. But their weight was when a franchisee says, hey, they are selling out fast, and this is what I like about them. And then probably here are some of the areas that they may not be strong in, or time will tell. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, that's super accurate. And it goes back to the value of masterminds in general, and more specifically yours, because I think having, not having those relationships, I wouldn't have gotten that insider information and known and then had those really, it really gives you the ability to have deeper conversations with people that are out there already doing it. Without that event and without me, having that deeper conversation, I don't know that we'd be talking about, KidStrong right now. So it was just an incredible time, an incredible moment that's really going to lead my life in a different path, over the next 6 or 8 years. So it couldn't be more important.
Awesome. So what in your mind has been the difference between, having a business as a franchisee and then having your own business that's not a franchise? Like, because there's people on here that are considering getting into business or getting into franchising. And a lot of times they think like, why would I pay for royalties? Like, they think that's too expensive. And that's the wrong question they should be asking, but you're doing both of them and you have successful businesses with both. Like, could you do a little compare and contrast or just what you like about both and maybe some of what you don't like about it?
Yeah. So in my experience, franchising initially was just almost a mandatory choice, just because, I had that marketing background, but did not have a entrepreneurial background, did not have a background in building systems and really knowing, what that's like to try to scale something of any size. And so I kind of knew what I didn't know. And I know I needed this other partner in some capacity. And by that, I mean the franchisor to kind of provide you that playbook. And that's what you're paying for. You're going to hear from everybody. Why didn't you open Blue Theory and not have to pay those royalties? And it's, you kind of laugh because without those, there's a whole lot of work and thought if the franchisor is doing it correctly, in those systems and in the support that they're providing. And and if I contrast that with my home care company, to be candid, that with the home care company, it's been a lot more difficult. I think it's a more difficult industry, but the level of support is just different. It's not quite as organized. So if I were to do it again, it's also why I'm going back, to KidStrong and doing that, because I just realized that I really need the support of those people that are helping design. They've got a staff of 15 to 20 specialists that are working every day with passion to do those things, so that I don't have to stumble for 4 years to kind of refine those systems along the way. So it's just, for me, I would much rather pay that 8 to 10% a month and just really do what I do better, which is some of those other parts and pieces that they expect. So that's how I would compare it.
Yeah, because you had a choice. I mean, you had successful mom and pop and you have a successful franchise. So it was a real choice for you. Looking back at just major people in your life that have helped you along the way, anybody come to mind, like mentors or things that you've attended or other franchisees within your particular system, like advice that they gave you along the way that you really took to heart?
Yeah. I mean, there's a bunch, I guess, depending on the pathway. I mean, Terry Blachek, who is a initial area rep for Orange Theory and one of the larger folks in the system right now, was a mentor to many people within the Orange Theory system. Just really taught me a lot about sales, taught me that it's really important. I think that when depending on your specific brand, a big part of it is really helping young people become leaders and being mentored to them. And if you're not kind of successful doing that, then it's going to be a much harder road, at least with Orange Theory and a lot of others. You're dealing with a lot of younger folks that maybe don't have as much life experience as you do, or some of the skill sets that you do. And so I think that's a big piece that he taught me, and I think taught my business partner too, is that development piece is really important to younger folks. And then, more recently, of course, I mean, and no bullshit. Like Eric will tell you, like, I listened to Eric on the way to my home care office with, I think, Franchise Secrets. And then when COVID hit, I wanted to continue my development and continue meeting people. One of my favorite things in the world to do is meet new folks and talk to them about their life experience and what makes them tick. And so I wanted to be able to keep doing that during COVID. And so the mastermind came about, and just the relationships that have been formed have been incredible. And honestly, you've been a wonderful mentor and someone to learn from. And I appreciate the time that you put into all of these things, because it's really helped me. It's given me confidence to think bigger, more of, that area rep piece. That's a big jump to go from like a 2-unit owner to a 6 or an 8-unit owner. But it's a natural progression, I think, if you really want to grow. And I think you've helped me with that confidence. So thank you very much for that.
Oh, for sure, man. And, I look back and, I lead the mastermind, but I'm a member at, just like everybody else. I'm always learning. I've learned from you, and one of the last sessions that I remember, we were talking about some guerrilla marketing. And you talked about the orange bikes and that whole thing. Can you kind of go into that? Because you're a marketing guy. Like, you understand marketing and grassroots guerrilla marketing, and you did it. A lot of people don't think, they think Orange Theory, big name, everybody knows about them. And if an Orange Theory owner had that mentality, they're not going to open up like as strong as they should. So talk about the orange bikes. Tell us that story.
Yeah, so that's a Terry Blachek, who I just mentioned. He kind of came up with that idea, and then it was really the infancy of Facebook, which was about 10 years ago, 11 years ago, when people were just kind of figuring out social media marketing. So it wasn't as big and as necessary as it is today. And so it was really important, and it's probably still important to this day, that you need to make sure that people in your little 3-mile radius know that something big and fun is happening. And so he went out and basically found a bike shop locally that is selling essentially garbage bikes for $30 or $40 a piece, and painted them, head to toe in bright orange spray paint. And in the middle of the night, you go out with a trailer full of 20 bikes and put them out at the major intersections in your 3-mile radius. And in the morning, people wake up and start seeing, they see one, but then they see two, and then they're like, okay, what's this? What is this going on? And so people are in Facebook asking what's going on, what is this happening, in our area. And the key to it was there was no logo on it. There was no, call to action on it, which maybe in the old days of advertising, people would say, well, you should never do that. But in this case, it was the kind of the secrecy of it that made it super popular. And it just kind of got people out of their normal routine, I guess. Like when you're driving to work, you're almost on autopilot. But when you see something strange and then you see it again, it was just magic. The city didn't like it, of course. I think we got fined. And our bikes got put in jail at some point. But, the value of it, you just can't imagine, because the bikes might have cost $500, the bikes and the paint, but you're getting thousands and thousands of dollars of value by people just kind of talking about it on chat groups and at their office water cooler and things like that. So it got adopted across, I think, the whole country. They don't do it anymore, but I think it was just an incredibly smart way to kind of go about it. And you could even argue what was interesting is that, like, bikes aren't a huge part of the concept either. So some people might have stopped there and said, well, we're not all about bikes. We're going to confuse people by putting bikes out. But you just kind of, some of those things you can't worry about. It's like you use something that is inexpensive and something that's pretty large, like a bicycle, and you just kind of go with it. And so I think that was important too, not to overthink it a little bit.
No, that's a really good point, because if you're sitting in a conference room in the boardroom discussing all the pros and cons and the reasons not to, you and I could have both been in there and shot down that idea. Like, what are we thinking putting a bike out there? We don't even have bikes in Orange Theory. It's treadmills. We do treadmills, and we're not going to get old treadmills, Yeah. And so, but it's just, not overthinking stuff and then just executing. So yeah, that's great. So bring us up to the current. Like, are you still doing, or when you launched, doing some type of guerrilla neighborhood marketing?
Yeah, what we're still doing, which I think might help some of your listeners, and it was really a huge light bulb for us, was really live events. And I think a lot of people try to do them. But what we do is we actually require our staff to come to us with 2 events per week. And that it doesn't have to be a huge event like a 5K or something. It can be as little as, a table at a local bank. But the point is like to still get out there and not rely so much. I think people now rely too much on social media and not out there. And our best leads are the ones that we get in person. And it's just always been a really important part of why Orange Theory was and is successful the sales associates are required as part of their day, 2 hours during the middle part of the day when it's not very busy during Orange Theory is when they're out. I mean, it was a little more difficult, of course, during COVID. People wouldn't want to be, approached and things like that. But it's really what's built and kept Orange Theory strong is that really aggressive, strong mindset. In the old days, the gyms, people would sit back behind the desk and people would come in and that's what they would expect. But that sales mindset, I think, is really going to carry me through, some other concepts and not just expect that, that your concept is great and people are going to just happen to walk through the door because they saw your ad on social media.
So we got some questions inside the chat. So again, we're live in the Franchise Secrets Facebook group. If you want to watch some of these podcasts live, go to franchisesecretsgroup.com, Franchise Secrets Group, and you can get into the Facebook group. We're going to get to some listener questions in the chat here soon, but I wanted to hit on one thing that I think is very important for franchisees that are hiring people. And I just had a private client of mine I was talking to them about hiring a district operational manager. So, and then there's somebody else in the group that was asking about hiring. So you brought up something. You still have your sales associates 2 hours a day. Basically, they're out there hustling. They're not there having a cup of Starbucks, looking at some spreadsheets and maybe sending some text messages. They're out there hustling. And that's the difference between a franchisee that is probably making money and a franchisee that is not making nearly as much money. So how do you just give some insight into that, whether it's hiring, whether it's motivating, whether it's the type of person, because it's really easy as an owner to say, oh yeah, you don't need to go out and do all that. We hired you to be on the phone. So what say you, Chris?
I would say, yeah. And it's not easy. I mean, I think that, especially now it's hard to find folks that are willing and wanting to go out. And it's hard to put yourself out there and do that. During our pre-sale period, I went out and did it myself. And it's like, you almost have to gamify it a little bit and just not get past the rejection, because I think that's the biggest part that people are afraid of, or that people are going to be really bothered when you go up to them. But generally, when you have a really good reason to go up to people and you're excited about something, they're receptive to it. And so, yeah, one part is I think in the interview process, really making sure that those folks understand that it's a sales-driven culture. And what we've incorporated, I think we do a slightly different like bonus structure than what corporate had rolled out. And, a decent portion of their compensation is sales based. And so they, once they hit a certain sales goal, then they get bumped up another $1 or $2. And then every pay period, we keep track of every type of sale. So not, whether it's a premium sale, they get a different point structure from from the other tiered sales. And that's really helped drive, that culture a little bit is keeping them motivated. And then we also do closeouts twice a month where we have call parties where everybody gets on the phone, and for 8 hours straight, our whole staff is calling past members, current members to try to upgrade them and that kind of thing. So there's this big, sales push at the middle and the end of every month that we still do.
All right. So I think what you just reminded me of is we need to have a session on sales in the mastermind. Caleb is next to me. Caleb, let's get that going and have Chris be on the panel for that, because I could go deeper and deeper and deeper into this topic because it's so important. And I think this is where franchisees are probably having an aha moment. They're like, I'm not doing what Chris is doing. And if you're doing what Chris is doing, you might not be doing some of the nuanced things correctly, because if you do that kind of thing, you get results. And it reminds me back in my days at Liberty Tax, where I saw where I was out there hustling, doing things, but I wasn't getting the results that other franchisees were getting. And I thought, what is wrong with me? And I realized they were 2, 3, 5 times, they were 5xing what I was doing in terms of quantity. So I thought you were going to say like an hour long call or 2 hours of calls, but you said 8 hours of calls. So franchisees and franchisors, like this is some gold here, but we'll definitely do a sales, and we'll get Ryan Casey in there too on the panel, because Ryan's an amazing guy that's helped a lot of people. He's also an Orange Siri franchisee. Okay, let's get to some listener questions. My man, Micah Logan, and he's pretty active in that Facebook group, new franchisor. He loved your answer on why you chose to pay the royalty rather than starting on your own, starting Blue Theory. What about fitness jumped out to you as a viable option? Besides being a fit, healthy guy, was there anything besides fitness that was interesting to you out of all the categories that you could have chosen?
Yeah, initially, I would say that beyond fitness being important, I think that was really what really shook me a little bit was when I learned about kind of the recurring revenue model a little bit more. And it just happened to be an industry that was within that. And a lot more companies, I think, have adopted that. But one thing about recurring revenue models is that I think that banks really like it, and it's easier to lend to. And so that really attracted me to it. And also, I would say, look, if you're wondering, for me, leadership is really important on the franchisor level. And with Orange Theory, it was important to me that they had actually they've been a franchisor, or the CEO had been in the franchising world before. So it wasn't their first rodeo. So you're not kind of going to be stumbling along as much with them, that first year or two, because they were already involved with Massage Envy. So I think that, that played a part. And the scarier part was kind of the fitness component, because like I said, some friends and family members were just saying that it was notorious for being almost like nightclubs. It's like trendy. There's always a new one, and then you're gone. So that was a little bit of the fear part that I had to get over. But like I said, you kind of had to understand where, I guess, if you look at where the country's headed sometimes too, I would look at demographics as well. And help that. And that's was my reasoning into KidStrong. So you kind of, once you put all those factors together, I think, leadership, demographics, and the business model, those are probably the most important things, because I think the worst piece of advice is like, sometimes because you like, I don't know, if you like yogurt or something and you go buy a yogurt franchise, like, It takes a crap load of yogurt to probably do like what a Orange Theory or hopefully a KidStrong does, and to just know, I guess, what those numbers look like before you make that leap.
Well, you're not in the Facebook group right now monitoring it like I am. And then Phyllis, like 9 minutes ago, said my guess would be the membership model. So Phyllis, you win a prize of some sort. Maybe a thumbs up from Caleb is the prize, but right. And then Danny and Susie Lowe, Crumble franchisees who are also in the mastermind, gave you a shout out. And so did Yoel in the mastermind. So let's see. Let me see if there's any more questions. If not, I'm going to go dive into some other things. All right. So why even start another brand? Like, what was it? Like, you have 2 businesses. You could have doubled down on those to continue. Well, you probably couldn't at Orange Siri double down to grow more, but you could have in the home care space. But let's say you could have with Orange Siri. Would you have doubled down more in that? Or did you want to have 3 different brands? What was it?
I think if we were able to grow within the Orange Siri system, we probably would have made that decision to do that. But like you said, by the time we had got our second one, we had bought a 3rd license, but most of the country was sold out, and most of the area reps had figured out that it was, as golden as they thought. And they were like, well, we're just not going to sell anymore. And so that got taken off the table. And then when you realize that you can't grow, I think any person in that position, you start looking for other opportunities and ways to do that. And then the other important thing is, when you're don't have an ability to grow, it's harder to offer your leaders within your group that upward mobility, which is an issue. And so we wanted to make sure that we were growing in some way, to maybe give some of those folks some other reason to stick with us as an ownership group, because you're going to lose your A players if you don't have a place for them to go to get to.
Ooh, A players. That would be another place that we could go right now. Let's talk, instead of A players, let's talk about failures. I was reminded of Aaron Wagner on the last Scale Mastermind call. He talked about losing upwards of north of $10 million on a deal. And it's not like he had $100 million in the bank. So he lost many, many millions of dollars. That was his kind of big failure story. And I've had some failure stories myself. So some of them have been big and some of them have been small. And there's a while, Chris, where I didn't have a big failure story. And people would ask me that. And I'm like, well, I stubbed my toe one day, or, something really stupid and small. But then there were some significant challenges at times. So what about you? Any points that along this journey that we're like, holy cow, this was a really rough patch?
You had mentioned with the home care business, it hasn't been to the success level that I expected and I had hoped. And I think that I made some mistakes on hiring, or we made some mistakes on hiring in the beginning, which was very, very, very difficult. It's interesting, but the partnership that we joined, it's actually grown kind of around us. So I know it's not the model or the business itself. I think it's just, I was probably a little overconfident coming off of Orange Theory that I could say, well, I can just apply all of this business knowledge that I've just gained at Orange Theory. And I also partnered with a friend on that one, but didn't have as strong of systems, as strong of training materials to kind of, I guess, launch, in that way. And so it's just been really, really difficult to get to profitability. We've grown our revenue, but the profitability part's been this huge, huge challenge. And then I know that you were in the home care space. In our case, our caregivers are independent contractors. So it's extremely, the most difficult thing for me is it's really hard to create any kind of culture with people that are able and willing to jump around, for a little bit of extra money here and there. And it's just very, very difficult dealing with. I think that that type of worker, I guess, in a way, and it's frustrating because you want to put your best product and your best person out there, and it's very important to these older folks that these things work every time. And there's many, many service failures in that industry that are just extremely difficult. So I may be exiting out of that business soon on a much lower, exit, amount than what I thought of when I was going to get into it. But I think learning and taking the lumps and going through the process is something I still probably wouldn't trade. But yeah, it's been rough. It's a rough industry, and it hasn't been as successful as we had hoped.
You brought up a point, kind of, your culture. Like at Orange Theory, you can have a culture. At KidStrong, you can have a culture. At some of these brands that different people are involved with, you can have a culture and you create a culture. Service brands can have a culture. You have, different service-based home services. I know home service brands that have a culture that are franchised and non-franchised service brands. Like that's important to them. And some that are very large have a culture. But there's some things where it's difficult to have a culture where you basically have independent contractors who are hired guns, and they will leave for 50 cents, $1 more an hour, or they might be working for multiple brands or companies at the same time. And that really is a challenge. And so people out there, when you're a buyer and you're thinking about starting a franchise, that's absolutely important. It's really hard to understand the importance of that, or how important it is to you, because maybe you're fine with paying an extra $1 an hour, having that type of person. But when you are thinking about buying a business or starting a business or a franchise, think about the types of people that you will have. Don't think of in terms of just blue collar, white collar. Go much deeper than that. And so I think that was we've never really talked about that on the podcast before. You also said something else. You said you became overconfident because you had tremendous success at Orange Theory. And And here's, and I'll tell this, I don't know that I've said this to you before, but Orange, you were early on. So your success was a lot due to you as a franchisee. Early franchisees in an emerging brand, they're winners. If they're successful, they're winners. Then you get a brand that's more established and people come into it and the brand has invested a lot in their own infrastructure and training and systems. And it's the Orange theory of today. It's not hard for somebody that's not a great entrepreneur to do very well in a really good brand. It's not very hard. So, but that's a word of caution out there to franchisees that came into a system, had tremendous success, but you're in a system where everybody's having success. If you get into an emerging system after that, you will likely face challenges. It's not going to be as easy because it's very, very different and it's easy to become overconfident. And I say this because I have experience doing that. I was a part of a brand that was it was hard to make money in. We did well and had a good exit, but it was hard to make money in that brand. And I went into other ones where it wasn't as hard and I did really well. And then I went into some other ones that were more difficult to make money in after I became overconfident in my own abilities. And I was overconfident in the emerging brand's abilities and their decision-making processes as a new franchisor. And so that whole overconfidence thing can really damage you in a lot of different ways. And I just gave multiple examples from the franchisor perspective, franchisee and franchise buyer. But I love that you said that. And hopefully you just saved some people some heartache on that, because do not get overconfident. That's the big lesson there.
Right.
Talk about partnerships. Like the best things about, we don't have to get into the worst things about partnerships, but you're staying at your partner's house. What are some of the things that you loved most about your partners, and what are the things that you've learned about yourself as a partner?
Well, and let me start by saying a lot of the success of us early on, like 90% of it is due to my partner, Deanne, because she was really the operations person, on the ground. I was on the ground a very little bit, but I was more in the background, like you were saying, from a marketing and advertising perspective, and really supporting her a little bit, when she needed it. But yeah, so
before, as you say that 18 minutes ago, she was, do you remember anything about an egg hunt around Easter where you had to find the Orange Theory bikes around town?
What's that?
Do you remember doing an egg hunt around Easter time?
I don't know. You mean like the photo hunt type thing?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry, it wasn't the egg hunt. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. With partnerships, I think that the most important thing is making sure that your value systems are pretty aligned. One thing that we talked about early on was really, how we treat people and how important, I guess, money is in some of those decisions. And we always wanted to kind of put the employees ahead of difficult money decisions, which happened, when COVID hit and we had to close the studios. We actually kept ours open for like an additional month, I think, where other local owners, were not doing that and paying the employees when we had to essentially make that decision to, a lot of them were just cutting them off and saying, guys, we're going into this uncharted territory. We're going to kind of have to let you go, and we'll rehire you as soon as we can. We kept them on for, I think, at least a month, and just let them know that they were the reason that we were successful. And, so that's just kind of an example of, making the right decision that isn't always the easiest. But I think it really gains a lot of loyalty from your folks on the other side. And yeah, just really going pretty deep. I think I've made mistakes though, like you were saying, not kind of making assumptions and not really knowing what your skill set is and what theirs are, and then making sure that works well together and how they complement. And just kind of having those difficult conversations on the front end, because it sounds cliche, but it is very much like a marriage. I mean, it can be very rough if you make the wrong decisions with somebody that can be really, really damaging to your future. So I think it pays to really spend a lot of time on the front end with a lot of difficult conversations, and just about how you are as a person, and how you approach people and life and those things before you jump in. Because it's like you get really caught up in the excitement, I think, of being partners at first, but you got to kind of step back and have those discussions to make sure that that when you do face a rough patch or a rough point, that you kind of can support each other and get through that together.
Well said. Well said. Well, I will let you go. I appreciate your friendship. We got to meet face to face in Florida last year when I was at Disney World with the family. And then out here in South Dakota, it's funny watching you and Joe and others walking down the streets of my hometown. It's like this town was overtaken by franchisees and entrepreneurs from around the country. That was a lot of fun. But man, anything last words that you would leave the audience with in terms of just building relationships?
In terms of building relationships, I would just be really unafraid to reach out to people. I've always been, probably you could almost say, aggressive when it comes to reaching out to people on social media. I think like Justin Donald and some other folks, it's like when I'm really interested in someone's background or what they're putting out into the world, I think that most people are really receptive as long as you reach out from an authentic place and willing to give feedback and provide you with some knowledge to help pull you up, because a lot of people, they were there at one time. So I would just encourage people to be aggressive with who you seek out and to get involved. If it's not, Eric's mastermind, it was a big leap for me to spend, $5,000 on joining a group. But I think, it's just, if you look at the ROI of the relationships, and the friendships that you're building, it's a no-brainer. So I would just say, put yourself around the right people, be aggressive with seeking those people out. And, it really has a chance to kind of like exponentially improve your life for the better.
Well, anybody else that's thinking about the mastermind, it's not $5,000 anymore. It's $10,000 a year. Masterminds go up in price as they go up in value. So it's $10,000 a year, but you're locked in for life at $5,000. I'm not going to say anything else about relationships. It's changed my life and trajectory. I'll say one thing about your point about reaching out to people on social, in Facebook groups, people that you can kind of get to know. I had somebody today reach out to me that I think is going to be doing amazing things in franchising as a franchisor. I've just shook his hand once before at an event, don't really know each other, but know who each other are. And he sent me a message today and said, "Hey, can I grab 30 minutes of your time?" And this is what immediately goes through my head. I really want to, because I really like this guy and I know I can help him, and 30 minutes would just, it would be very valuable to him. But I get those messages daily. So my response is it's $1,000 for an hour of my time. And then I started to, because that's what I charge. But now I was thinking, how can I help this person? Because he did take the time, was respectful, is trying to add value, and is adding value in the Facebook group and other things. And I know he's just not a time suck. I know all that. So I started to think, as I was making breakfast, how can I help him? And so it came to me. I'm like, well, let's do a bonus session for this free franchisor series that we're doing to help franchisors this month. And so I said, "Hey man, how about I do a 30-minute session with you and I invite other franchisors? So I'll coach you for 30 minutes. And then we'll see if anybody else can do some coaching." And I said, I'm going to use it as content, or just put that away in the mastermind vault, or put that out as a drip campaign to people that are interested in the mastermind that haven't quite pulled the trigger yet. So I think like that, like, I want to be able to help this person. How can I do it? He's not at the point where he's going to pay me my hourly rate. And I don't really want to do an hourly rate like that. Like, that's not the goal. The goal isn't to make $1,000 for 1 hour of my time, because that's trading time for money. I don't like to do that, but I will do it if there's something more. And I believe there might be something more with this particular guy. He's not ready to do that, and I get it. So how do I do what he wants and do it in a way that's beneficial to me? So that's, an hour ago, that's what Caleb and I were working. I'm like, hey man, this is what we're doing. I sent them an email, both of them an email to get it scheduled by the end of the month. And then Chris, as we were on this podcast, I was thinking, I sent Caleb a text message that will probably, everyone will be able to know that as I'm typing on my computer while we're on the podcast. I said, what about if we run a contest that somebody else gets a half an hour of coaching from me? So now I can do 2 back-to-back sessions for an hour, and I can help two people out versus just one person out. So, but the point of that is it all started because somebody reached out to me. He's a contributor to a group, and he's a nice guy, and he did a cold outreach, and look what he got. And I do the same thing with other people, because there are other people that I can't afford their hourly rate, and yet they do things for me. Roland Frazier is somebody that comes to mind, and he spoke at the mastermind. I'm not at the point where I'm going to drop 30 grand for 4 hours of his time, but the guy gives me his time, and I contribute to him in other ways. So I love your advice there on relationships. Like, if there's somebody that you want to meet that you believe that can add value to their life, figure out how you can add value to their life, and be the guy that comes up with a solution like I came up with. Maybe you are the one that does that. Or if you have a podcast or an audience or something where you can, make it valuable for that other person on the other end, there's usually a solution to be able to build relationships with the people that you want to build relationships with. So man, I'm so glad that you brought that up. Again, I thank you for your time today, Chris, your friendship, the things that you do inside the Franchise Tribe Mastermind community. You are one of the guys that contribute the most, and it's just such incredibly valuable information. So with that said, I'll let you go. Thanks again, my friend.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And if anybody ever has, any questions, feel free to reach out to me as well. Happy to help in any way I can.
Tell them how to reach out to you.
Well, my Gmail, OTF, Elmore, ELMORE @gmail.com. Or you can reach out on Facebook as well.
Connect with him on Facebook. Guys, that's an easy way to start. He's a giver. He is an absolute giver, like some of these other people in the mastermind. You don't have to be in the mastermind to get value from my community. All right, we'll leave it there. Thanks again.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Franchise Secrets Podcast. Whether you're watching or listening, please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and to whatever channel you're listening on. If you want my help with anything from buying a franchise to franchising your business, please visit franchisesecrets.com.